So I think we have a good plan going. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Resuming debate, reprise de débat, the honourable member Tobique-Mactaquac.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to rise today on Bill C-30, one of our government's blueprints for Canada's dynamic agriculture and agri-food industry. Madam Speaker, agriculture is hugely important to me in my riding, and it has played an enormous role in my life, having grown up on a large farm, having produced myself, after finishing university and coming home, farming on my own, and learning life's lessons through the farm, and having worked within primary agriculture off the farm, and working in food manufacturing, food processing. And I think that it's really helped me throughout the years to become the person that I am. And I really would like to thank my parents for giving me that opportunity and recognizing that growing up within an agricultural household has played a significant role in my life. And just as I have been a supply managed egg producer for 6 years up until just recently, my wife and I just recently exited the egg business. But I can say that over the last 6 years, having had the ability to learn about the supply managed system and the challenges and the opportunities that evolve because of it, it's been very affordable to me in my life to learn those lessons and to see the opportunity that agriculture offers to allow family operations to transition from one generation to the next. Not only within agriculture as in primary agriculture, but also through finished production and secondary production as well. And I think we can link these easily to the CETA agreement. Canada's a medium-sized open economy. Our economy's prosperity depends on open trading environment. 1 in 5 Canadian jobs depends on trade. About half of the world of agriculture production in Canada is exported. Canada's agriculture and food exports exceed $60 billion a year, and half of the value of Canada's agricultural production is exported, which is why our government strongly supports free trade. The Canada-European Trade Agreement demonstrates Canada's continued leadership with regard to the opportunities for Canada's farmers and food processors on the global stage, which has been nothing short of breathtaking, and I hope that it continues in that same fashion, and I believe that the CETA agreement is going to allow agricultural producers to flourish. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization has projected the global demand for food is projected to increase by 60% by 2050. 60%. Much of this demand will come from growing middle class around the world, which is on track to exceed half the planet's entire population over the next 15 years. And a lot of this production isn't going to come from new agricultural operations. It's going to come from the growth that's going to be able to be sustained through the industry, through people that are able to innovate and accept technology and grow their businesses through that. This is good news for farmers in my riding and across the country. There's no doubt that the benefits of CETA will bring to Canada's agriculture and agri-food industry. We're talking about access to Europe, a region that is among the world's largest markets for food. And that is why timely implementation of CETA remains a top priority for this government. Since taking government, 99.991% of my constituents believe in a global economy and our government's efforts to place Canada on the world stage. And when we talk about agriculture in my riding, we're not only talking about dairy. We have a vibrant dairy sector, but we also have a very vibrant beef sector. And we have a very vibrant maple syrup manufacturing sector. So, we need to look at the total picture and include all the industries when we talk about trade. And CETA will provide a strong foundation for Canada and the EU to demonstrate leadership on an inclusive, progressive approach to global trade. At the same time, Madam Speaker, we know that some sectors of agriculture will be impacted by CETA, namely our dairy and cheese producers under the supply managed system. While CETA does offer enormous opportunity for many of our farmers, such as our maple producers and our beef producers and our aquaculture industry, there will also be greater access for European cheeses to Canada. Canada has provided additional access to the EU on 2 specific dairy products, cheese and milk protein substances. New imports of European cheese under CETA will represent 4% of Canadian cheese consumption and 1.4% of milk production overall. The supply managed system has been preserved under CETA. Madam Speaker, the Government of Canada fully supports supply management. In fact, we were the government that created it, and that is something that we are extremely proud of. Supply management provides a fair return for farmers, stability for processors, and a safe, high-quality food products for consumers, something I know that is important to many farmers in my riding and to constituents across the country. We recognize the important role Canada's supply managed sectors play in ensuring a strong rural economy, accounting for over 25,000 direct jobs and over $34 billion in overall economic benefit to this country. As my colleague, the Honourable Minister of Agriculture, likes to say, Canada has the responsibility and the ability to feed the world. And we need look no farther than the innovation that's already occurred within the agricultural sector and the ability to capitalize on the innovation in the future. Canada is the 5th largest exporter and the 6th largest importer of agriculture and agri-food products in the world. With our small population and huge production capacity, Canada is today's world leader in agricultural trade on a per capita basis. Trade accounts for 1 out of every 5 jobs in Canada. Canada's dairy industry alone generates farm gate sales of $6 billion, dairy industry, and processing sales of $17 billion, and 22,000 direct jobs. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food and his colleagues continue to consult closely with Canada's supply managed sector regarding the transition through CETA. The Minister of Agriculture has met with Dairy Farmers of Canada, the Dairy Processors Association of Canada, provincial dairy associations from across the country, and young dairy producers. These meetings were very productive and with many ideas and fresh thinking. Discussions mainly focused on how to strengthen the sector in the face of domestic and international challenges and how to transition assistance for new markets under CETA. Responding to these concerns, the government is committed to putting in place a transition package to help the sector adapt to the new CETA commitments. This government has said from the get-go that we need to help dairy producers and processors make the transition when it comes to CETA. That is why in early November, the Minister of Agriculture announced an investment of $350 million for 2 new programs to support the competitiveness of the dairy sector in anticipation of the entry into the CETA agreement. The government is supporting the continued strength of the dairy sector by helping ensuring dairy producers and processors continue to innovate and improve productivity. The 2 new programs identify $250 million over 5 years for a dairy farm investment program that will provide targeted contributions to help Canadian dairy farmers update farm technologies and systems and improve productivity through upgrades to their equipment. And I can say firsthand that I've had over 24 calls from dairy farmers wanting to know the specifics on these programs, when they're going to take effect, and how they can access these funds. $100 million over 4 years for Dairy Processing Investment Fund that will help dairy processors modernize their operations and in turn improve their efficiency and productivity, as well as diversify their products to pursue new market opportunities. These programs will complement the dairy sector's ongoing investment efforts, helping both current and future generations of dairy farmers and processors to remain profitable over the long term under a strong supply managed system. With regards to the allocation of the CETA cheese quotas, the government is currently reviewing the results of the public engagement process that concluded at the end of August. The Minister of International Trade's decision will take stakeholder views and interests into consideration before determining how to allocate the new CETA cheese quotas. The allocation policy for the cheese tariff rate quotas will be finalized following the passage of CETA, implementation, legislation, and before the agreement enters into force. Madam Speaker, while there are challenges, Canadian dairy sector remains a progressive, innovative industry, and Canadian dairy farmers are doing a great job of meeting the needs of consumers on food quality, animal welfare, the environment, and of course, great taste and high nutritional value of Canadian products. Consumers love Canadian dairy products. Production continues to grow every year. Butter consumption has risen by 10% over the last decade. Yogurt consumption has increased over 60% during the same period and is expected to continue growing. Dairy farmers are among the global leaders in their industry when it comes to the environment. And Canada's dairy sector has a smaller footprint for carbon, water, and land than most other leading dairy industries around the world. Today, Canadian dairy farmers are able to produce 14% more milk than they used to 20 years ago, thanks to better genetics, better nutrition, and better farm management practices. They are able to accomplish this with 24% fewer cows while producing 20% fewer greenhouse gas emissions. That's thanks to advances in animal genetics and nutrition. Forward-thinking Canadian farms have contributed to the success of the Canadian dairy industry in many ways. Canadian dairy genetics are exported to over 80 countries around the world. And of course, who can forget our famous cheeses? Our famous Canadian cheeses, which are winning top prizes at some of the world's leading competitions. Madam Speaker, we all want a bright future for Canada's dairy sector, and the agricultural sector continues to create jobs and be a leader in innovation, not only within the dairy sector, but across our agricultural industries. To help build that future, we are investing in science.
The time is up, and maybe the member would be able to finish his speech during the questions and comments. Questions et commentaires, questions and comments. The honourable member for Courtenay Alberni, is it?
No. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the honourable member for his speech, my friend and colleague. One thing he didn't talk about much was that we know that CETA will lead to increased costs of prescription drugs for Canadians. In fact, Jim Keon, the president for the Canadian Generic Pharmaceutical Association, he said that a study prepared for the Canadian Generic Pharmaceutical Association by two leading Canadian health economists in early 2011 estimated that if adopted, the proposals would delay the introduction of new generic medicines in Canada by an average of 3.5 years. The cost to pharmaceutical payers of this delay was estimated at $2.8 billion annually, based on generic prices in 2010. Now, when the Liberals were in opposition, they agreed with the NDP that greater analysis was needed, as well as compensation to the provinces. So, will the member opposite explain why they're comfortable signing off on CETA without any further analysis of how these increased drug costs will impact the people in their riding?
The honourable member for Tobique-Mactaquac.
Well, I thank my honourable member for the question, and I know he's very passionate about the subject. And you know, I know that it's really hard for our members opposite, especially directly across from me, to recognize the benefits of trading agreement. And, you know, this is an agreement that we've seen, not only ourselves, but I believe the members opposite farther up the row would agree. If you look at the overall broad concept of the agreement, it 100% is a win for Canadian companies, not only within agriculture, but across the board. And I believe that when the dust settles and the agreement is completely ratified, I believe that everybody in this House will be 100% completely confident that we've done our due diligence on this side of the House to ensure that we've signed off on a very progressive trade agreement with one of the largest, fastest growing populations in the world, and that Canadian consumers and Canadian citizens are going to be able to see the benefits of this agreement for years to come. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Salaberry.
The honourable member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think the member knows well where the NDP stands when it comes to the very low compensation that the government has offered to the dairy industry, particularly the dairy industry in Quebec. Another agriculture sector that's affected and that is asking for compensation in Canada is the Association of Wine Producers. The EU exports far more wine to Canada than Canada exports to the EU, and so this makes wine producers in Canada fear the worst. Are the Liberals planning on giving any compensation, appropriate compensation, to wine producers in Canada?
Tobique-Mactaquac.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for the question. And I think, you know, the reality of it is when we talk about the wine sector in Canada, the wine sector in Canada has actually flourished under an open market system in which free trade has abounded for a long period of time. And, you know, I respect my honourable member's opinions about the dairy sector. But, you know, I come from a family, my wife, her parents are dairy farmers, and they're very excited about the opportunities that it could abound from a CETA agreement. And if you look at it from a progressive stance of being within the dairy industry, you know, yes, there are going to be challenges as we transition from where we are today to where we're going to go through this open progressive agreement, but there's going to be also major opportunities for Canadian businesses. And specifically, there will be major opportunities for Canada's cheese and milk producers. And not only that, there will also be amazing opportunity for Canada's wine producers. And I think that, you know, we're a trading nation. I think we've openly said that. And I think Canadians are well aware that given our small population and large land base, we have to be a trading nation. And I think that Canada, that's something that we've done quite progressively over the years. We've used our large land mass and our ability to innovate and use new technology to grow our businesses in a progressive manner that allows us to be competitive not only in Canada or North America, but on a global scale. So thank you, Madam Speaker.